Welcome to the Pop Cult Podcast. Here are your hosts, Ariana and Seth.
I'm Seth.
I'm Ariana.
And this is the Pop Cult Podcast. Wow, you said that. I'm Ariana. God damn it, I'm Ariana.
It's the film.
Did you think I was going to catch it? I think I was going to catch that.
I noticed it.
I'm Ariana.
I'm here.
Today, we will be reviewing Luca Guadagnino's latest film, Queer, with Daniel Craig. That'll be later. But first up, we're going to be talking about the feature film debut of documentarian Joshua Oppenheimer. The film is The End, which is a musical fantasy. A rich family live in a salt mine converted into a luxurious home. The earth around them has apparently been destroyed, but their son has never seen the outside world. So that's the description of this movie. I'm going to turn to you, Ariana. Physically, I'm going to turn my entire body.
Physically,
facing you.
Emotionally.
Spiritually. What did you think about this movie?
It was boring. It is, okay, so it's over 2 hours.
2.5 hour show.
Yeah, which did not earn that runtime. It is irksome at times. There's obvious use of auto-tune, especially on Tilda Swinton's voice.
The first song, and she starts singing, it was embarrassing how blatant the auto-tune was. It sounded like a fucking robot singing.
Yeah, like if you're gonna, I feel like there's a charm when certain actors don't have a clear singing voice, but you just let it through, and maybe they start developing over time. There was neither a singer in this group that I was just like, they're gonna carry the whole film. Just watch. Nobody in here like made me think, wow, they are a beautiful dancer, a great singer.
No.
What movements?
The closest they came was Moses Ingram.
Yeah.
The girl, because that's her name in the movie. That's one thing. No one has names.
No.
There's mother, father, son, doctor, friend, butler, and girl. And I got the sense it was very stagey. It felt like a stage play or a stage musical that had been filmed. And so they had more space to kind of move around in, but most of the action kind of takes place in like one or two places.
Yes.
And they have this very visually interesting space of the salt mine, and there's moments where there's shots of it that are interesting, but I didn't feel they really did anything with the location that made it interesting.
No, and like what's interesting is like we saw a little bit of like behind the scenes about this. Not a lot. Which was like a behind the scenes with the actor like George McKay. He's like dancing on the like salt, like in the salt mines. Apparently, like he had been trying to be like, the director. It's kind of like indicating the director wasn't really directing them, so he was trying to find a way to perfect his art.
Mm-hmm.
And it was not good. It was.
Well, I want to talk about the director a little bit, because I do feel a little bad that I have not seen his first or his documentary features, because they have both been nominated for Oscars.
Yeah.
The Act of Killing and The Look of Silence. And they're both about topics that I am very interested in. The Act of Killing is about the Indonesian mass killings of the 60s. It was the year of Living Dangerously, the Peter Weir film.
Yeah.
Takes place during all of that. And then the Jakarta Method book that I think I've mentioned on this podcast and I've talked to you about talks about that specifically. Mm-hmm. So it's a documentary he made about those killings. And he follows individuals who participated in the killings, where they were killing alleged communists and people opposed to their regime. A lot of them became involved in organized crime, and many of them are still in power in Indonesia. So his film, from what I've read, is a very dangerous thing, and it's very confrontational with these people, and has them do reenactments.
Yes, I think I've heard about that film.
And then The Look of Silence is also about Indonesia and all of this, but focuses on a different person. So I haven't seen those, but I do want to sit down and watch those. I should put those like on my list for this year at some point. Because I just am trying to think of maybe there's something in those movies that would help me understand what he was going for in the end.
Yeah.
because I have a really hard time figuring out why. Like, what was the point of this movie? There was a Q and A with Oppenheimer before the film screened at some event, and he talked a lot about race and class, and I was like, I'm all on board. You got me. I'm right there with you. And then you watch the movie, and you're like, what does any of that have to do with this movie? Because the movie doesn't really address any of those things,
No,
or
like
at least not in a way that I could comprehend.
we really don't even get a description of how the outside world is really like.
Well, I would ask you, what happened? So there's clearly been some global disaster. You watched the movie. What happened?
I don't know.
Yeah, neither do I. It
And
was just like they kept talking about like things being burnt
yeah,
and like there's just nothing up there.
yeah, and so they're living almost like
Well, they're trying to recreate their life on the surface through this like facade of a house.
yes, and through the facade, it kind of reminds me when you're watching like films like Pride and Prejudice or like where like the
Those
mom is occupied about the look of everything, right?
They're well, it seems like they're or I guess this only takes place over a few days, and it's like the winter season has begun, or
Yeah.
they're recognizing winter. So it's like they're choosing paintings and decorations. That's a big chunk of the movie.
Yes. And so me not knowing that this is like like that this has to be an apocalypse. It's kind of like and then you find out that it is in that setting. You're kind of like why or there's like no commentary on how it is absurd to the fact that this family has this amount of wealth.
Well, I want to interrupt you there because I do think that the movie is trying to say that, but in a narrative, you would expect the girl, who's the outsider, when she shows up, to directly comment on those things in an interesting way. And perhaps she did, but it may have gotten like mixed up in these horrible songs that are in this movie.
It is like it's horrendous because there's a moment that we don't see it.
Mhm.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. The girl is like having dinner with them after they're kind of like, I don't know why we're bringing her in here, but she had begged to stay because she's just like, I won't survive on the outside. And she is like mourning the fact that she's lost her family and that is her doing, right? And she sees a portrait of what I'm assuming is supposed to be mother's family.
Yeah.
And she's like, they're not here. You and I must understand each other. Your family isn't here. And mother refuses to talk about it.
Which is like, oh, okay, we're gonna explore that, right? Like people who put their heads in the sand and refuse to like deal with trauma. And
Yeah.
once again, maybe he did do that in this movie, but I could not see it in
was like
there.
it was brushed away because later on there's a conversation between mother and father. And I think it's supposed to be like it's not as if the apocalypse happened like suddenly. I think it was supposed to be they moved there and that he was like, well, you never bothered to call them. You never seemed to make any attempts to bring them here. So my thought is you didn't want them around. So you're blaming me, father saying to mother, about a decision that you made. And we don't really get a clear thing that if it like he's in the wrong or she's in the wrong. We don't get an image.
Well,
Oh,
I think when these characters are introduced, that's it. Like I don't feel that I learned much more about mother or father or anybody beyond their introduction into the movie.
yeah, and it's like it becomes this weird thing. It's like, oh, comes in, they allow girl to stay. Well, they're kind of like, well,
Oh
are
no, 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 no.
okay,
They don't allow girl to stay. Remember, they try to like bind her and throw her out of the salt mine, but she gets out of their hands and runs back into the house. And then
yeah,
the son begs them to let her
yeah,
stay.
yeah,
And that was where I was like, oh, okay. So now there's going to be this weird tension, right? No, not
yeah.
really.
No,
It's like, oh, she's a little wary, but she gets over that pretty quickly.
it's also like this weird thing is just being like, mother, you were rude. She was trying to have a conversation with you. She was trying to have an understanding. Oh, was I rude? Oh, I didn't notice I was rude. That's the end of it.
Well, here, I want to read. This is from the Wikipedia entry about the plot. But I want to emphasize that as I read this, it's not really leaving anything out. And I want you to think about how stilted and how there's no really sense of flow here as I read this like plot description. The girl struggles to adapt to life in the bunker. Mother is suspicious of the girl and voices her concerns to the father while also trying to teach the girl about their life and trying to investigate her motives. The mother tries to be intimate with the father, who is surprised by her actions. The girl and the son slowly bond. The son confesses to his parents that he is developing feelings for the girl, and they argue about the nature of love and the son's naivety. And like that is the way the story plays out. It's like, oh, now here's a scene between the father and the mother, and they say this thing. And then the son is by himself and he sings this song. And then the girl is here and she sings this song. And then they meet up. And then we go to the friend, and now the friend is doing this. And you're like, but how are these things connected to each other? Like, it's just things that are happening, but it was hard for me to see the reason why this scene happens next to this scene. And I like the great director David Lynch died the week of this recording. And if you know me, you've looked at the blog, you've heard me talk about David Lynch. I am a fan of weird shit.
Yes.
I love weird shit. But the weird shit has to have some sort of coherence to its like weirdness. It has to be like there has to be a point of view that you can grasp. And I can grasp some pretty like weird points of view. I had so much trouble figuring out like what are you talking about in this
all
movie?
seems very stilted.
Well,
So
stiff. I think stiff. Yeah.
So when I think about, for example, musicals, I think about the fact that like it takes a lot of work to do a musical because okay, you made the music, now you're bringing in the cast, and the cast basically has to fill in those roles to bring these characters to life. So a lot of editing happens before they go up to they go into showing to an audience, they go back and regroup. And I also, for example, think about like a musical that has been solely in film when I think about like Dancer in the Dark.
Mm-hmm.
Dancer in the Dark, even though like
original film musical.
Even though like I'm not a like I don't really like the director too much.
Lars von Trier.
It also had like they were going being like, all right, I want to make a musical, and he goes and brings in Bjork, who's a very strong musician.
Yeah, who has a history of singing. Catherine Deneuve, who's a singer from Umbrellas of Cherbourg and other things.
Yeah, and so what he did was work on this project beyond just himself and bringing all of this to life with songs that have to do or hint to what's going to be happening.
I think Bjork had a very direct hand in the songwriting of that movie.
Yes.
And this movie, I was trying to figure out, like, well, who wrote the songs? And there's two writers on it, Joshua Oppenheimer and Rasmus Hesterberg. I looked up Hesterberg, and they had credits on, like, Girl with a Dragon Tattoo, like, I think the original film version. But, like, nothing musical. So that leaves me thinking, so were the songs Oppenheimer's? Like, he's the one who is responsible for this? Because as an autistic person... it felt to me like the work of someone with autism.
Yeah.
The song lyrics were so direct in how they described things in a way that, like, describing... It's like a character looking at someone and telling them how they feel about them in a very direct manner. It read to me like autism. I think that's what it read.
For songs, the son is just naming things that's around him.
Yeah. And then there was the interesting subplot where the father has the son write these histories about him.
Yes.
That are lies. And I thought, okay, well, that's going to go somewhere, right? Like, what a great metaphor. We have the children compose myths about our history, right?
Yeah.
Not really. I think the son kind of catches on that it's not true, and he kind of gets mad at the dad, and that's it.
But then the son tries to start to put in his own feelings into it, so he can make a romantic gesture for the girl about how he's feeling, and then put it on his father, while his father's kind of like, I don't even remember what I said to your mother the first time I met her.
Here, I want to read you this, and I want you to tell me, does this sound like a story an autistic person would write? And I say this again as an autistic person myself. The girl argues with the son about his scale models of the outside world when he tries to justify the brutality of the first transcontinental railroad. The mother and friend both struggle with sleeplessness and nightmares, which the doctor downplays and prescribes them sleeping pills. During a writing session, the son tries to learn more about their lives before and learns more about his mother, how his mother and father met. The butler and the father describe love and longing, and the son writes a flowery and embellished version of events where the father met the mother, which he later mimics back to the mother. Like, then if you read any other plot, I feel like on Wikipedia, it will be an event happens, which leads to this, and then people interact with that thing, and that event leads to this. And like even a David Lynch movie follows those kinds of stories where like even Cooper's dreams, as weird and esoteric as they are, like you understand why they're in the thing. So one of my questions about this is, why is this a musical? What is the reason that this is a musical?
I don't know. It's just like a failed attempt. I think it doesn't help when also you have the characters going by just their titles.
Well, no, I think you can do that. There's plenty of plays that do that. It's just it doesn't have direction. It doesn't have a clear. It's like he was like, I want to make a musical, and in my head, I have these very particular images of what it looks like.
Yeah.
So it's in this mine, and they built a house in the mine, and right there's a train set, like all these specific things, and they're all there, but they don't have anything. There's no cohesiveness between them.
Yeah.
There's nothing that helps me see beneath the surface and go, oh, I can see like what these things are connected to and why they're important. And I can understand, like why this song is in this place. And also the fact most of the songs sound the goddamn same. There's maybe like two of them that sounded different.
Because there was a moment that I tried to imagine, like, okay, when they're talking about like basically everyone's position in the family, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the mother starts singing, and because of this, I am a mother. And my question was like almost like, okay, are they saying that the son isn't their son?
I do think that might be implied a little bit, yeah.
And that like it was just a boy that they had found or a baby that they had found, and that like finally she was able to become a mother, and she's a mother of this group. But how can you be a mother to this group when there's just like,
well, there's a point where you thought there was some like weird Oedipal shit going on between the mother and the son,
yeah,
but then that doesn't really go anywhere.
It's just like you bring the light of day, and he's just like, I love you so much, and you're just like, okay.
But like, yeah, it's just a lot of things happen, and then the ending just hits with a thud. Like it doesn't really have any impact.
Yeah, girl just accepts her life,
and they just kind of move on.
Yeah.
And I think you can still do that once again. You can still have this ending where like, because where else are they going to go, right? But there has to be something meaningful to it. I just didn't get it.
At no point is the son, and you can correct me, it's kind of like talking to the girl being like, how is the outside world? Like, does he ever?
She tells the story about how she got to where they are, but yeah, she doesn't really talk in much detail.
Yeah,
and you would think he would be very curious about that.
Yeah, like you think like maybe he'd be like, oh no, let's go back out and let's go find your family. Like this night, because it could be this naive thing that he's not been around death and he hasn't seen how dangerous it is. He's kind of like, no, we can just go.
Yeah, you are right about the death, because like they don't talk about there being anyone else that was down there with them that died. There's no graveyard, right?
No.
So yeah, he doesn't know what it means for a person to die. He has no like real experience beyond books he might have read.
No, it's just like, oh, you found a female. Well, I think I'm straight. I'll fall in love with her.
Yeah, also very heteronormative movie too.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I just felt very empty when the movie was over, and just kind of like, and it's been a long time since I've had that kind of reaction to a movie that wasn't like a big Hollywood movie.
And I think it's also worse because it's like we have all these really great actors. You think Michael Shannon.
Well, if you make a movie with Michael Shannon in it boring, what the fuck have you done?
Yeah, and it's like Tilda. I've not seen a movie that I was this disappointed in that Tilda Swinton was in.
Yeah,
as a main character.
Yeah, I would say it's the worst Tilda Swinton movie and the worst Michael Shannon movie I've ever seen.
You did not use them to their max of their thing. Like
they're really boring.
Yeah, there was barely any shift of like character, and you think about like
There was
how
barely any shift of emotion.
yeah, and you think about like how we've seen like Tilda Swinton play these like mothers who then turn out to have like these like really powerful like private lives in their mind only to get this.
Yeah. So, would you recommend the end to our audience?
No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is one movie where I would go, if you see the trailer and you think it's going to be good, just really isn't. Lee, played by Daniel Craig, a solitary American in Mexico City, falls for a beautiful, elusive former soldier. Journeying together into the jungle, Lee sees for the first time the possibility of an intimate and infinite love. This is the latest film from prolific director Luca Guadagnino. It is an adaptation of William S. Burroughs', I think it was like a dual novella, Junkie and Queer. Uh, so, Ariana, we have seen nearly every Luca Guadagnino movie. I think there's some older ones that I think have gotten a little less acclaim, and so I haven't really been super keen on like searching those out. But if we look here at the filmography of Mr. Guadagnino, I think we're going to find we've seen a lot. Because I've seen I Am Love, and you've seen that with me?
Yes.
Okay, I was hard to remember. He's
Also Tilda Swinton,
Tilda Swinton, yeah.
which I was thinking about when I thought about like
I would rather see Luca Guadagnino direct the end. Yeah. We've also seen, I never saw A Bigger Splash. He wasn't the writer on it, but he's not the writer on a lot of his movies, so I don't know if it's any good. And also apparently has Tilda Swinton in it. But after that, starting in 2017, we've seen every film he's put out. So Call Me by Your Name, Suspiria, Bones and All, Challengers, and now Queer. And we also saw his TV series, We Are Who We Are, the miniseries he did for HBO. What do you think about Luca Guadagnino as a filmmaker?
I really do feel that he's going to be one of those directors that in the future is going to be named like one of the best directors out there, along with having an impact in modern cinema.
Yeah, I think he is going to be like on the level of like a Scorsese or a Coppola or something
Yes.
like that. He is so consistently putting out movies that are so different from each other, but still maintain the same level of quality.
Yes.
When you think about that list of movies I read off, you have romance, horror, sports movies.
Yeah.
Like Bones and All is based on a young adult novel, and every single one of those movies is so good.
Yes.
So now we come to Queer. What did you think generally, without getting into plot details or characters, just what did you think of Queer?
It is, I feel like that film is almost the embodiment of yearning. It is beautifully done, in which you could almost be like, this is a watercolor painting done by a fucking expert.
Yeah, I would say it is a movie that perfectly captures what it feels to be lonely and desperate.
Yes.
It also touches a lot on addiction, not just to heroin, which the character of Lee is addicted to, but also an addiction to people or an addiction to a type of feeling, and how people become so desperate when they chase those things.
Yeah.
But the desperation, in a way, it gets in their way of getting to the thing because they've forgotten, I think, essentially who they are or where they came from, and they've just been so consumed by their obsession with that thing
Yeah.
that they've lost themselves. And so there isn't a person there anymore.
No.
What do you think of Daniel Craig's performance in this movie? Do you think this is the best Daniel Craig performance you've ever seen?
Yes, it is the most vulnerable you're going to see him. If you are a fan of him being like
James Bond.
This is not going to be James Bond. This is going to be the most vulnerable and raw that you're ever going to see him. It's going to be the most pathetic you've ever seen him at times.
And like you'll weep at the end. Like the end is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it is heartbreaking. It is one of those things that like I can like Seth was looking at people scoring this film
Mhm.
and was surprised to see some low scores.
I think on Letterboxd it's a 3.4, which is insane to me.
And I think it has to do with the fact that like this is not a likable character. This is a character that is very much amongst its time, and by that I meaning he's not healthy in his
Yeah.
obsessions.
Well,
This is
he,
not like a cool, I'm a drug addict and I found the love of my life kind of thing. No, this is I'm a drug addict and I don't fucking understand or respect boundaries.
when it's there's a sweatiness to the role.
Yes.
Like I think that's one of the best. He's just so he's because we're in Mexico, so it's already very humid and hot and tropical. But then you add onto it this just nervousness he has. So he's always walking around with like flop sweat.
Yeah.
He doesn't know how to stand, especially when he's in the presence of the man he's attracted to. And so you see him not know like how to position his arms and his hands and the nervous laughter he's always
He's
doing.
not comfortable with himself.
He's uncomfortable presenting himself in the state that he's in to this person
Yes.
and knowing, oh shit, they're gonna see right through me, kind of a thing.
Which is such an interesting thing when you juxtaposed it to Jason Schwartzman playing
Joe,
Joe.
who I think is supposed to be kind of a play on Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet that Burroughs would have been friends with.
Yeah, and the thing is like Jason Schwartzman is a surprise to see because it's like he's not your regular thin rail Jason Schwartzman, but he's still like this talkative.
He's chubby, but yeah, he's. Would you say this is like any character you've seen Jason Schwartzman
No,
play?
it felt like he was, when he came into the room, I really thought, what was that comedian with the beard that he plays the piano?
Zach Galifianakis.
I really thought,
yeah.
Part of me wished that it would have been.
Though I think Schwartzman did so good in this.
But I'm saying that the reason that like you juxtapose it is here are two gay men in the film.
Yeah.
And Joe does not give a fuck. Joe is recounting.
He does give a fuck.
He's
angry about all the men he's brought back to his place that have stolen things from him.
Yeah. It's also this weird thing of like he doesn't give a fuck in that sense of like he is okay with his queerness.
When he's also okay with being this like fat guy. He doesn't care.
He's like at times like kicking his feet in the air like as he talks about these things.
He does a lot of like laying on flat surfaces with his like legs up, like little position, like they're very feminine positions. You would think
he's like a little cherub.
Yeah.
He's a little cherub in floral t-shirts that are like similar to Hawaiian stuff. But he's also like in comparison to the way that like Lee is represented, that Lee is supposed to be comfortably gay, but he's not. Because he keeps chasing straight men or men who want to be straight.
Or he just chases after men without confirming first if they are gay or not.
Yeah, because it's like there is a mark at the beginning of the film that is basically telling you what the whole plot is going to be. He says hello to this guy. The guy's like, you know what? Lee's a great guy, but the problem is every time I hang out with him, he tries to get me to bed.
He's so desperately horny.
Yeah, and it's just like, you know how it is with those queers.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then Joe, which mind you, they're not together a lot, but when they are, Joe's kind of like, why don't you fucking ask? Or it was like, why aren't you asking? Like,
yeah, his thing is, why don't you ask him if he's gay?
And then, or Joe being like, why aren't you meeting men where you're supposed to meet men that you know that they're queer?
Yeah.
And we don't have to go through this.
Well, because there's like a bar for homosexuals in the town.
Yeah.
The Green Lantern. So it's just sort of like you just go there and you'll know for sure.
Lee thinks he's better than that.
Well, yeah, I think that's part of it is because William S. Burroughs, this was based on like real events from his life.
Yeah.
And he spent time in Mexico and he was able to fund it because of the GI Bill. He served in World War II. And back then, when you served in the army, you got like a hefty sum of money.
Yeah, now it's like you can go to school for free, but you know.
And even then, you're probably going to get scammed by some online university. And then in a few years, the government will go, don't worry about it. But you're still
covering on the base.
You're still out the money. So yeah, it feels like a very vulnerable story for Burroughs to tell because like he includes his own heroin addiction in the story. And I read a thing where it said, because he originally wrote Junkie, but the publishers were like, well, it's too short. So then he wrote Queer as the companion piece to it. And from what I could tell from what I've read, and I haven't read Burroughs before, is that this film is an adaptation of both of them.
Okay.
And one of the things Burrow pointed out is that in Junkie, his character is very calm, cool, and collected while he's high. And then Queer is about him when he's sober.
Yeah.
And you see, and he's like apparently very vulnerable with his body and his flaws and his behavior, of how like the drugs made him function. And we kind of see that in the movie, right? He shoots up heroin, and all of a sudden we're dealing with a much more confident, assured Lee.
Yes.
But then when they end up so far away from civilization, there's nowhere to buy heroin anymore, he starts like crumbling again. And so, yeah, it's also a movie that I think portrays a side of the 1950s that never was popularized in American films, which is the sort of post-war burnout. There were a lot of men that came home from that war, and they didn't all get married, move to the suburbs, and have a wife with kids.
No.
Some of them like fell apart because they had experienced really traumatic things. They had other traumatic events in their life before the war. And so it's so interesting to see the 1950s world portrayed in this way. The cinematography.
Beautiful.
So cinematography done by, and I had to write down the phonetic pronunciation of this name because it's one I'm not too familiar with. Seombu Muktiprom,
Okay.
who has previously worked with Guadagnino on what I would argue are his best-looking movies. He's done a cinematography on Call Me By Your Name,
Yeah.
Suspiria,
Okay.
and Challengers. And I feel like all of those movies have exceptional cinematography.
Yeah, and I feel like it's also probably you're getting the fact that you're challenging this person and bringing something completely new to the table.
Because what he asked him to do here is you've never seen images like this in a Guadagnino movie.
No.
And that's why when I first saw the trailer for it, I thought this looks so unlike anything he's ever done, and that made me so excited because he's a director who could easily just coast on a pre-established signature style.
And he doesn't.
No, he doesn't.
Like this style that like if you wanted to rip it off for a rom-com or another fucking like drama with romance, I could understand it, but I know he's not going to because he's just sort of like this was for this film.
Well, it's Luca Guadagnino makes a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah, and I think it's like it's a very gay film at the end of the day. I think this is also a film that like the reason that it's hard to savor it for some people is that because his character is not going the correct route of these things as we would, nowadays, would people be more open and accepting to a certain degree or tolerant. We're also dealing with a director who is older in comparison.
Yeah, he's in his 50s, I believe. Yeah,
who's in his 50s, who lives like in Italy, and who has probably dealt with the fact that like there's religious bigots, there's people that even though like, oh, it'd be okay for him to be gay in Italy, would it really? Like,
I mean, they have a fascist prime minister, so.
And the way The Longing is just done with those like dual image kind of.
It's like the word that I saw someone use, just disembodied. That was their review.
And it was that's the word that is used a lot in this film.
And it's ghost images imprinted over what you're watching of what Lee wishes he could do, which is reach out and touch Eugene. And so we're constantly, I think the film kind of, you don't realize it at first, but you realize, oh, we're in Lee's head the whole time.
Yeah.
Even if it seems like we're not in Lee's head, when the emotional response to something won't be Lee saying what he thinks because he keeps things very internal. The scene will then become about what's going on in his head. So the production design was another thing I thought about, because that's not cinematography. It's sort of the way the streets look, the way buildings look, the way sets look. And so I found out it was a gentleman, Stefano Baisi. This is his feature film debut as a production designer.
He did great.
And he said, because I saw an interview where he said, I don't work normally in films, so I'm wondering if he works like in theater, like stage productions. But I was like, like the world of this movie looks amazing. It's so fleshed out.
It felt very controlled, but in the best way.
Well, it felt like a fairy tale in some
Yeah.
ways, but and I like that they have this fairy tale mood for what's this very tragic, sad story. Because when you often look at like Grimm's fairy tales, they're often very tragic, sad stories
Yeah.
where somebody dies at the end, and that's like the lesson of the story.
I wanted to ask what your thoughts were on like Drew Starkey, which is supposed to be the other
I
character in this film.
I looked him up because I'm like, have I seen this guy in anything? And I've only seen one thing he's in, and I can't even remember him in it, which was the recent Hellraiser reboot. He's apparently one of the friends in there somewhere,
Okay.
but like I only remember the main girl and like the Pinhead. I don't remember him at all.
Yeah, yeah,
So maybe he must not made an impression on me. I think he has a very difficult job in this movie because he's playing the object of the film's desire. Because if the whole film is from Lee's perspective, then the film is Lee.
yeah.
So the film is choosing how they want to portray him, and it's not until much later into the movie that I think we get a sense of the character of Eugene.
Yeah.
Up until that point, it's Eugene is this. To talk about another movie, he's the lighthouse.
Yeah.
He's the thing that they want.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's in the second half of the movie when he and Lee go on the road, no pun intended, because I mentioned that Jack Kerouac was a friend of
Yeah.
This is a little English major nerdery for you. When they go on the road together, that's when I think we really start to get a sense of Eugene's character.
Yeah.
Because did we ever get an explanation as to his relationship with Mary? Like who she was to him?
No, we got the sense that they played chess together.
Yeah.
That they might have been together before he ends up going with Lee, and that I like there's just a look of rivalry. Like they don't even end up having clash
Yeah.
of words, which could have happened in like an earlier film that they would have like with the brassy female. It's like it was just a side glance.
Uh, because her look in this movie, that Mary character, even though we don't really hear much from her, there's another film that was based on a William S. Burroughs novel
Yeah.
called Naked Lunch, directed by David Cronenberg, starred Peter Weller. I've only ever seen the movie once, and I probably need to go back and revisit it. But I felt Judy Davis's look in that movie looked
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot like Mary in this movie. And I've got a little picture I brought up so Ariana can see. It's the sort of red hairdo that's very much of the period.
Yes.
It's that bleed over from like the late 40s into the 50s.
Mhm.
The dream sequences in this movie,
They're heartbreaking.
like they're visually captivating. And then when you understand like what the meaning of the dream is to Lee, like you said, they'll just shatter your heart.
Well, it's also like the stuff that afterwards has to do with the story that you can relate to dream sequences, but it was because they were actually in taking something together. I think what was very interesting is later on we get Leslie Manville, who nails everything we've ever seen her in.
I found it funny. I think we probably said this on the show. I found out she was briefly married to Gary Oldman before they got a divorce. I don't really know why they got a divorce, but I can imagine why they got a divorce.
Yeah, she's much more liberal, like
Leftist, yeah.
leftist
He's
than him.
openly like a conservative. But she is the female Gary Oldman in that
I think she's better than him.
well,
So
maybe he's the male Leslie Mann.
exactly.
Okay. I'm just using Gary Oldman as the reference point because sadly that's who most people are going to
Yeah.
know. I wish more people knew who Leslie Manville was. She is an actress who has appeared in many Mike Leigh movies,
Mhm.
and is amazing in all of those. And you can pretty much cast her in any role,
Yeah.
and she will
Phantom
nail it.
Thread is my favorite just because of like how she like goes after.
I think my favorite role of hers, it was one of those where when I sat down to watch the movie, I didn't think this would be my favorite role of hers. But the reason it stuck with me so much was because it felt so authentic. And that was 2002's All or Nothing, Mike Leigh film.
yeah.
And I think she plays like a supermarket checkout
Yes.
clerk, and she lives on an estate, I think in Manchester, or is that set in London? I forget. Um, but like she was so fucking real in that movie that it like destroyed me watching her. She's
Yeah,
just so good.
that you don't appreciate until you've noticed her in other stuff.
Yeah, and I think if you just watched All or Nothing and you'd never seen Leslie Manville before, you'd be like, "Oh wow, that's really sad." But then when you watch like we were saying, what was the other film? Phantom Thread.
Phantom
Or you
Thread.
watch Another Year, another Mike Lee movie.
Or Disclaimer that she's
Yeah,
on.
where she just plays such like I was just thinking in Mike Lee. Think about Another Year. This chatterbox who won't shut up but constantly can't find a relationship that lasts. And then you compare that to All or Nothing, where she is the most like tense, quiet, working class woman.
Yeah.
And it's just, she's incredible. And so here in Queer, she plays Dr. Cotter, who is this botanist who clearly seems kind of unhinged and lives out in the Amazon rainforest studying the plants there for their medicinal properties.
Yeah, I think my favorite was when they tell Lee about this doctor. They tell you're really gonna like her.
Yeah.
Because they're just like, because they know Lee is not completely there and she's not gonna be completely there. And then
Yeah.
when Lee meets her, she's like, she's fucking crazy.
Well, and I don't know if you caught it when they first meet, everyone's sitting at the table, and Eugene is kind of making eyes at her husband, and her husband is kind of making eyes back at him. But then that doesn't go anywhere, which I was kind of glad that it didn't go anywhere. But it's and then Cotter and Lee are just so caught up in talking to each other, and her especially to figure out why he's there because she assumes he's there to steal her research.
Yeah.
When he's just there to basically go on an ayahuasca trip.
Yeah.
And then that ayahuasca trip scene.
That was insane. That was so well produced.
It's not it. He doesn't do the sort of cliche drug trip crap. But it felt authentic to having taken things like LSD or shrooms and knowing that ayahuasca is a far more intense experience. It felt like, yeah, I think that's probably close to the sensation you feel when you're on it. That just the boundaries of reality kind of like
and like
slide
her
apart.
Sadness afterwards for them because she's just like
she saw something like remarkable.
She was like, most people get to the door and they can't cross, and she's like, both of you did, and like you could go beyond to find something else.
But Eugene really wants to leave, and Lee feels very uncomfortable about it all.
Yes.
And then there's that scene where they part ways, and it's he sees Eugene, he hears something, he looks away, and then Eugene's just gone.
Yeah. And
that's the last time he ever sees him. Would you recommend Queer to our audience?
Yes. Yes.
Why calm down?
Watch it twice if you can. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I would say Queer so far we haven't watched a lot of movies produced or released in this year so far, and there's a lot of like late 2024 movies that we don't get access to until now, and we count those as 2025 movies. So I would say, as of right now, this is a strong contender for number one for the year. We got a lot of year to go though. So but it's Luca, and Luca usually is going to rank pretty high on our list. And he even has another movie coming out this year, which let me look that up. He's a very productive guy, that Luca Guadagnino.
He's very busy.
And I wonder if it's just one of those strike while the iron is hot kind of mindsets where they're giving you money, so you're just going to keep taking the money until they stop giving you the money.
And it could also be like he has people he trusts to help him with
and also the script I just want to mention about Queer was written by Justin Kurtzikas, I think is how you pronounce his name, who wrote Challengers, and that was his first work with Luca Guadagnino. So I think he probably found someone that like is on his wavelength.
Oh yeah, because I was reading about Challengers and how like him and
which I think is based on a manga.
Like him and the director were like, yeah, the three of them end up together. Like they were just like.
So here's his next movie that's coming out sometime this year. After the Hunt, a college professor is forced to grapple with her own secretive past after one of her colleagues is faced with a serious accusation. Very generic description, but Luca's name attached has me interested. Cast Julia Roberts, who I think she's reached this age where like now you could have like an incredibly powerful older woman role, I think. kind of like Ethan Hawke has kind of done. Ayo Edebiri,
Okay.
Andrew Garfield, Michael Stuhlbarg, and Chloe Sevigny. So we see a couple people that have worked with him before. Stuhlbarg and Sevigny have been in previous work with Guadagnino. And we have three new people who I'm very interested to see how they play off of each other. Um, and once again, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross doing the music. So it feels like Luca has really kind of built this group of people.
Where he's like, all right, I might not see, like for the like his actors, I might not see you in this project, but maybe soon enough.
Yeah. And then his music people, he's like, because I think it was, I think Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross did the score for Bones and All. I
Yeah.
think that might have been their first work with him. And so he's clearly likes what they're doing. Yeah, so I would say check out Queer. And if you have never seen a Luca Guadagnino movie, watch all of them. They are all very, very good movies. Well, that was the Pop Cult Podcast for this week. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Make sure to check out our show notes for all the important links, including to our website, popcult.blog. Make sure that you're subscribed to be notified wherever you listen to podcasts so that you'll know when our new episodes are out. If you visit popcult.blog right now, you'll of course find many more reviews. Coming up this next week, we'll be finishing our Hazy Shades of Winter series with reviews for The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford and Abi Kaurismäki's Ariel. We'll also have our patron pick review next week of the recent Netflix film Carry On. If you enjoy what we do here on the podcast, we'd encourage you to support us over at Patreon. When you do, there's 4 different levels to pick from. I think it was about $3 or $5 being the lowest, up to $20 a month. Each of those levels gets you access to more things. No matter what level you donate at, you're going to get access to patron-exclusive podcasts. We have a couple series of those up right now, and we'll begin working on a new one here very soon. If you donate at our writer's room level, like our patron Matt, you'll get to pick one movie a month for me to watch and review, and you can even choose to add your own thoughts to that written review as well. Next episode of the Pop Cult Podcast, Oops, All Nosferatus. We will be reviewing the original silent version, the 1979 Werner Herzog remake, the 2000 meta-commentary film Shadow of the Vampire, and the recent Robert Eggers version. Until next time, listeners, you keep listening, we'll keep watching.